This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Resolving the homelessness issue is something that practically everyone can agree to, including the homeless. And with the Carnival season coming, the city has promised to accelerate the pace. In Baton Rouge, there was a quickened pace of a different kind as a new governor swung into a special session with an agenda of thorny issues. The freezing weather this week created a special issue of its own as school closings raised concerns for parents. In Havana, a city with cultural links to New Orleans, there was a music festival last week that featured Trombone Shorty. And there will be more music coming our way now that the Jazz Fest has announced a lively lineup that has more energy than a Rolling Stone. Before the Jazz Fest, there will be Carnival, for which area police departments have been recruited to join the beat. Joining our beat are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Sophie Kazakov, reporter for the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Chelsea Brasted, reporter for Axios News, and LeBron Joseph, news anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV Channel 26. We go on over to Sophie first because the city's really been wrangling with this issue, like so many cities are, of homelessness. And of course, we do have, Mardi Gras is just really coming soon. So the city has tried to decamp all of the tents of homeless people in different parts of the city. How is that effort going?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a bumpy road, but overall, I think the city is on pace according to the plan that they laid out over the summer initially to basically decommission, which means house people from the city's homeless encampments and also other people living on the streets and in the city's shelters, put people in subsidized housing throughout the city, and clear the encampments, meaning block them off in some way, fence them, or sort of reprogram the space in some way so that people don't come to use it in that way again.
So one section has been cleared out by a couple of weeks or so ago, and that one on Chapatulas?
Exactly, yeah. That was in November.
Yeah, and so the other one is it's underneath the Claiborne Bridge, right?
Right.
Is the I-10.
So that's the second one that the city has identified as their target at the moment, and then, from there, they're supposed to be moving on beyond those two sites.
Now, there was some consternation among certainly some city officials at a meeting that was held last week, a community meeting about this, pointing the finger at some nonprofits groups, particularly Unity, which has been working with the homeless problem here in the city really for decades. So have they come to terms more?
Yeah, so there was a very tense meeting in Tremé, a lot of business people and residents who are very frustrated about the pace of the closure of the encampment, especially ahead of Mardi Gras. And they, expressed a lot of concerns about this, wanting it to be sped up. And then the next day, very promptly, that was in the evening, and then the next day at City Council, by the time everyone arrived, the partners, the city, the Unity, Travelers Aid, the other group, they had all apparently had a very productive meeting that morning and had arrived on February 9th as the date that they're going to be closing the encampment by.
So there was some feeling, I know, by city officials that things are not moving along as quickly as they would have liked to have had them move, whereby those who have been working with the homeless, these nonprofit groups, say it's a very complicated and complex issue.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think after the first encampment was closed, it became clear that some of the nonprofit groups that were involved had some concerns with the way that the city had handled the process of closing that first encampment. So basically, I think at its core, the issue is around the timeline, and the advocacy groups who have been doing this for a very long time saying, you know, it is complicated, it takes a long time. There are people living in the encampments who are experiencing a range of different vulnerabilities that make it so that we need to think about that before we try to focus on a particular deadline as the main priority.
And coupled with a housing crisis as well, where it's difficult to find some place for these folks can rent, and the amount of money that this group of people are able to pay for housing these people doesn't necessarily match what the market says. In other words, if they can pay $1,000 a month, but the market says that a one-bedroom is $1,200 or $1,300, then
yeah, it's really difficult. So our homeless population, are these mostly people who are indeed employed, but just as LeBron pointed out, they just can't make the monthly rent?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a range of different people experiencing homelessness in New Orleans. There are certainly people who are working and who leave the encampment every day to go to work and come back and have to figure out how to get ready for work in that kind of situation. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, homeless advocates, people who work with homeless people will say that, you know, it's really about the rents being too high, that, you know, people can't afford to live in the city. There's also obviously, as we know, you know, people experiencing issues with drug addiction and people experiencing mental health and physical health challenges in the encampments as well.
So they feel, though, the city and these homeless advocates feel that they're now working within a plan that they will actually be able to accomplish to meet the deadline of February 9th?
Yeah, that's the plan.
How bad is the homeless problem here in the city anyway?
Well, it's, you know, if you think about other cities, you know, where we know that there are major encampments, you know, in huge parts of the city, New Orleans really doesn't have a homelessness issue at that scale. At the last point in time count, which is like a one-night count that homeless advocates do, there were 550 people on the streets in the city. That was in last January that was taken. So I think a lot of people who are working on this issue see that kind of as a hopeful number, you know, that really, like, we do have the resources now as a city to handle that.
This 500 is still too many.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
Go ahead.
I was going to say.
Are drugs part of the problem?
I mean, I think a lot of people are struggling with various other vulnerabilities in the encampments, certainly, whether that's, you know, drug addiction or, you know, mental and physical health challenges. But I think at the end of the day, what's, you know, definitely been driven home to me, at least by all of the advocates working on this issue, is that it's really that there is not enough affordable housing, and that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Okay. All right, Sophie, but thanks a lot. LeBron, it's going over to you now. You got a trip to Cuba.
Oh my goodness, an incredible trip to Cuba. We got back this week. This is done with the Trombone Shorty Foundation, bringing some of their students from New Orleans to Havana. This is the third time they've done this, and it's done in conjunction with the Guillermo Tomas Conservatory in Havana, which is a school of musicians, young musicians as well. The opportunity for both of these groups of kids to play together. They played at a festival the other night, but that was just one opportunity, them playing at this particular festival. They also played at, we were there, Chris Leach and I, you can see on the screen and shoot some stories about this, but this was a night festival in Havana, which that's both groups of the kids playing together. They also played at the school, a number of different opportunities for these kids to sort of culturally blend, if you will. Very, very talented young people from all sides. Some of the Cuban kids actually came to New Orleans last year as part of this same partnership as well. But it was 4 days or 4 or 5 days of a number of different events. This particular night, Trombone Shorty on stage at a free concert, which was free for the residents of Havana. So there were thousands of people there. But a number of New Orleans artists also along for the trip. Tank and the Bangers, Big Frida, Ivan Neville, Anders Osborne, all playing at different venues and different events as well. An amazing experience, but for these young people, as we've spoken to them and interviewed them, a very rewarding opportunity as well. Most of the video you see here, the shot with the phone, were some of the events, but it was really a number of tours and old Havana and throughout different parts of Havana, and so it was pretty interesting.
About how many people went on this trip with you?
Well, if you count the musicians and the rest of the folks that came from New Orleans, probably 60 or 70 with the other artists. But this is done in conjunction with a tour company called Cuba Educational Tours, or Travel, Cuba Educational Travel. This particular set is called Getting Funky in Havana, and of that group, there was probably 150 people that paid from around the country. And what makes this special, they're a part of this whole week-long thing, but some of the money they spent to come to Havana goes to music education for the Tomas Conservatory and the Trombone Shorty Foundation.
So that's Cuba Educational Tours. Travel.
There you go, Cuba
Educational Travel.
That's
okay,
exactly.
We got that one right.
Pretty awesome.
There's so many connections between New Orleans and Havana.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
That New Orleans was once part of the Archdiocese of Havana. But man,
Interesting.
the dream is, with all the cruise boats coming out of New Orleans, if it would
Yeah.
be legal for one day to have cruise boats going back and forth between Havana and New Orleans, it'd be a big boon for both of us.
It's a city so much like ours, believe me. Their old Havana, you think you're in the French Quarter. The cuisine, amazing. The art, amazing. So much in common with New Orleans and the music even.
So how open is travel to Cuba now for Americans?
For educational purposes, open. There is a categorization you can ask for when applying for a visa, person to person. There's another one for the benefit of the Cuban people. Any of that stuff, fine. If you're checking off the categorization, I want to eat great food and get drunk. I'm not sure that one exists, but I don't think that would exist for New Orleans either.
I was going to say, maybe how could we figure this visa situation out, you know?
For the benefit of the Cuban people, I am there to spend my hard-earned money and learn about them. Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Fun thing to do, huh?
Fun thing to do, and those kids are amazing. You'll hear a whole lot more from all of them.
Yeah, great. All right, LeBron, thanks. Okay, Chelsea, over to you. Now, you've been following what's been going on in the special session of the legislature, and it's been kind of whiplash because things have been changing. However, we've come to a decision, have we not?
Yes, I think they knew we were filming, right? Because on my drive over here from the West Bank, session ended. So we can now say what has happened as past tense. Up in Baton Rouge. So 2 major headlines came out of the special session. We are getting a new congressional map. The redistricting is complete. And the second piece of that puzzle is that we will now have closed primaries for some elections in this state.
So bottom line, did the governor get his way all the way, or was some change?
So
That means maybe.
that means you come see, come saw, right? So obviously, Governor Landry called the special session first day in office. Kind of, as you mentioned, came out swinging a little bit with some of his hopes and dreams for this special session. One of those was the closed primaries. He wanted to see closed primaries happen in this state, and he's getting some. Certainly not to the degree he was hoping for. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That hope of his was sort of interesting. I think a lot of people were watching because he actually won as a result of our jungle primaries. He had more than 50% of the vote in the open primary, and that's how he ended up in office today. So interesting.
So with these the closed primaries, now explain what does this new bill do?
Sure. So the closed primary basically means that we are going to have partisan primaries for 4 categories of election in the state. We're going to see them for congressional. We'll see them for the PSC, the Public Service Commission, for the Board of Education, and also for, oh gosh, now I'm going to forget it because I said them out of order.
State Supreme Court.
Yes, State Supreme Court. Thank you. Thank you for saving me.
No problem there. So this legislation also allows unaffiliated voters to choose if they want to vote in either of the closed primaries.
Correct.
But not registered independent.
Yes. So I think this piece is going to be probably the most confusing for voters. So in a closed primary, if you're registered Republican, you vote in the Republican primary. If you're registered Democrat, you vote in the Democratic primary. However, many Louisianans are not registered with either of those parties. If you are registered independent, you will not be able to vote in any of the primaries.
The closed primaries.
Yes, thank you, the closed primaries. If you are unaffiliated, which is to say not registered Republican, not registered Democrat, not registered Independent, you can choose which of the primaries, of the closed primaries. So you'll choose, do you want to vote in the Republican primary or do you want to vote in the Democrat
You know,
primary?
this is a problem of its own making. Back in the days when you had party primaries up into the 70s, you wanted to register with a party because if you didn't register with a party, you couldn't vote, okay? And so people didn't register independent. I mean, what was the point of it? Once they had the open primary, what was the point of registering with a party? It didn't make any difference. And so back then it was seen as a reform to have the open primary, but now people are starting to see the politics a little bit differently.
And there are about 800,000 people registered as independents, so they're not going to be able to vote until the general primary, so they'll have no say.
General
really.
election, yes.
General election,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
We're all
general primary,
confused
which-
about it, right?
Yeah.
It was the first primary, second primary,
Sorry.
general election.
Right, yeah.
People still first primaries. They still say that, but it's outdated, yeah.
Yeah, because it's really a runoff
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
second one. Anyway, okay, let's touch on a real important one also, is the congressional redistricting.
Yes.
Did Landry get his way on that one?
Ish, right?
Yeah.
So what was talked about was that the bill that Landry was backing was the one that was going to essentially endanger Garrett Graves. Garrett Graves' 6th district, that is now the one that is, it essentially looks like a backslash through the state, sort of following the Red River. So it does potentially endanger Garrett Graves in that district.
There was a little bit of change, though, from what Governor Landry had wanted on that. But essentially, Garrett Graves is the one who's now threatened.
Correct.
Politically
Correct.
threatened. Okay. All right, interesting. And the Supreme Court districts also changed a bit, too. Is that right?
That actually did not get
They
finished
didn't?
before
Okay.
they closed.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, I will be finding out more about that. Okay, E, Mardi Gras and security.
Even more complicated than the legislature.
Yeah.
It's security. You know, last Carnival is when the issue really struck home that there's not enough police, you know, in New Orleans or nationwide. And not having had parades the year before because of COVID, people really wanted to get the parades back. And so they put something together. A lot of us felt on Sheriff Susan Hutton, who was new in the job.
Hudson, yeah.
Okay, and they tried to put together and to bring people in and all that. And it was an okay effort, but after that they found a lot of not intentional misappropriations, but just people trying to do something at the last minute. There were a lot of hotel rooms that were reserved and paid for visiting police officers that were never used. There were a lot of irregularities. I think they got it together this year. I'm not sure if anything purposely was done illegally, but the council and the sheriff's office have a cooperative endeavor agreement to put the plans together. They've been working on it for a long time. And there are 18 agencies outside of the sheriff's office that have signed up to bring at least 1 to 2 people here. These are throughout the state. And these are agencies like the Jeanerette City Marshal's office. Now, if I was the Jeanerette City Marshal and they said, hey, you want to come to New Orleans for a long weekend? We'll put you up in a hotel and we'll feed you.
And make money.
I say yes, yeah. And it's a lot of those kind of people. It's a lot of small town marshals and sheriffs, but they wear a badge. You know, that's the big thing. And a lot of area university police departments too. So they have 18 of those that are putting together, and then combined with what the sheriff's office has, that's a few hundred people that'll be there in addition to the police department. So, and there's a whole structure about who gets to stay and, you know, how much you get and all that. So it's a problem that needed to be fixed, and I think it's kind of fixed this year. So it looks like it's going to be better this year and a lot more stable.
And the reason why it's a problem is because of the understaffing at the NOPD. They need to bring in extra bodies. Are these people going to get any sort of training from the NOPD about crowd control and stuff like that, or they're just put out there? Do you know?
I think no. I mean, it's just a basic training. When you talk about crowd control, I mean, you don't need to be a genius for that, okay? But you just need to do what you're told, right? But another thing that they've done is they've have an agreement with RTA where they're going to have a bus to send people, if they're arrested on something minor, that they'll take them into the quarter where there'll be a processing place, and they'll do all your processing in one place. They don't have to go sit in jail for the weekend. And so they're going to try to move that also. And there's another program, and there's always been something like this, but there's an enhanced program about locating lost kids. So the organizational part going into this Mardi Gras is a lot better than it's been.
It's just a little bit more organized, and I know they'll keep on working. So you really don't want to take a trip to the booking bus, huh?
No one needs that trip, right?
Well, one of the important things I think with that is just that this is a problem we're going to be seeing year after year after year. The staffing issues you're mentioning, they're not going away.
Yeah, so they're sort of honing this plan, which is good for future too.
But if the guy from Generette goes back to Generette and tells his buddies, hey, you want to do this next year,
That's what we need.
They're going to be standing in line.
The one thing we haven't heard this year is shortened routes. This parade can't do this or can't do that. And apparently the result of, or one of the benefits of having enough people is that we haven't heard that.
Yeah.
They were abbreviated routes, right.
Abbreviated.
And there were also some construction issues last year that caused issues. So like maybe for the first time in 3 years or so, Carnival will be whole, looks like.
Okay, very good, E, thanks. Sophie, quickly over to you. You know, we've had these freezing temperatures and schools have had to shut down just for safety reasons, but it's caused a problem for parents.
Right, yeah, I spoke with a few parents on Tuesday and sort of saw a bunch of Facebook comments from others. There's a lot of definitely disagreement between parents on this. I mean, I think some parents say, you know, you should close schools whenever there might be a risk, whether it's a risk of, you know, possibly getting a bus, you know, sliding on ice or a school not having adequate heat. There's parents who are saying that's, you know, that's good, that's fine. There are other parents who are, you know, concerned that school closures mean that they need to miss a day of work, that they can't afford to miss, that it causes a lot of challenges in terms of finding childcare on a short notice.
Yeah, I can see where parents really would have perhaps a difficult time with that. And then there's also the issue of learning. How are schools tackling that? Was there any virtual learning done with some of the systems, do you know?
Yeah, so I think it depends. I think there is virtual or remote learning being done when schools need to close for weather-related events, and then in other schools there aren't quite the structures in place to do that at this point effectively. But I definitely think that during COVID, the way that remote learning became normalized has given schools sort of a new ability to say, okay, if it's not safe, we're going to close for the day. But definitely parents and some others have concerns about what that means for students learning during those times.
And systems have different approaches to it too. Like Jefferson was open, Jefferson School's on Wednesday, I believe.
Right.
Other systems were closed, but then do they do it like abbreviated days? Is that something that parents think about that?
It can happen sometimes, yeah. I think it depends on the event and what their analysis of the situation is. But I think basically the school administrators I talk to are saying safety first, and they're weighing these things, and they get that it's difficult for parents, but they're definitely trying to think about safety as the primary goal.
Well, freezes aren't something that are happening that frequently here, and what are we now nearing the third week of January? So how much more winter do we have left? About 2.5 or 3 weeks or something?
We hope.
We hope. All right, Sophie, thanks. And let's wrap up with you, LeBron. And Jazz Fest announced their schedule.
Yes, if you're a fan of Jazz Fest, then certainly it's always exciting to get the lineup, the big names, Chris Stapleton, The Killers, Foo Fighters. We all knew that the Stones were coming. It's always nice to know that we'll get John Baptiste back this year.
That's great.
He's doing his international tour, and Trombone Shorty will be closing the big stage again. For me, it's always exciting. The 600 or so artists that are performing, 85% are Louisiana bands, which is really a big deal. Over 500 bands, Mardi Gras Indians, brass bands, and all that. It's hard to find any one musician in this city that doesn't get excited about the festival, especially on the stage this year with the Stones, things of that nature, where you've got people coming from around the world to sort of peruse this. So it's a huge deal.
And so the Stones are going to be, they added actually an extra day to the Thursday to the second weekend.
That is correct. And this is the first year in several years that we're doing 8 days total. 4 days, Thursday through Sunday the first weekend, Thursday through Sunday the second weekend. Obviously that Stones Day is not Locals Thursday. The ticket price a
little bit higher.
Local if you can do it. Thursday is what that is.
Local plus.
Local plus, but every year I hear, oh, I don't like this and I don't like that, or I love this or I love that. I kind of resigned myself years ago to, well, if you're on stage when I get there and I'm in line for the soft shell crab po' boy, okay, well, then I see you. I rarely oh, I've got to see this or I got to see that.
Other than the Rolling Stones, who to you is the biggest act?
Probably the Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters.
Yeah, Foo Fighters.
In terms
Dave
of
Grohl and them. Yeah.
international act.
Yeah,
but because it is wall-to-wall music, it is kind of hard
Yes.
to make that choice.
I mean, I've loved, for the decades that I've gone, seeing so many just, unforgettable performances and all that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old. I just,
No.
I'm a much bigger fan of the food, but I hear all the great music,
I don't know. I'm kind of with you, LeBron.
It's hard to pass up that stuff.
Hard to pass up that food, and let's hope that everything goes smoothly with the
Yes.
Stones, because we've tried with them before. And
Yes, we have, and that was, I think they were booked 2 or 3 times. I think the first time Mick Jagger got ill, and then it was a rebooking that, if I'm not mistaken, it was canceled. I know the festival itself was canceled 3 times, although it was 2 years done. They recanceled it they rescheduled it to the fall, and it canceled again.
Okay, well, we're hoping for good weather for everybody.
Yeah.
Go
Well,
enjoy
there'll
those
be-
Stones.
There'll be a rainy day that you can play around in the mud at the Jazz Fest too. So
You always want to do that. All right, LeBron, thanks a lot. Other stories, E.
The issue of Mayor Cantrell's travels and who she travels with is back again. Last night, Fox 8 broke a story about when the mayor went to Dubai last month. She traveled there, and that was paid for. League of the Cities. The city of New Orleans paid for Jeffrey Vappy, who's her security guy, and it cost say like $14,000. And this is at a time when there's more investigations, that sort of thing going on. So we'll hear more.
Okie-doke. Thanks a lot. Sophie.
Yeah, just to go back to the homelessness issue for a bit, the low barrier shelter downtown, the contractor who has been operating it since 2018 when it opened, let their contract expire, and now it's on the city's team of 2 people in the Office of Homeless Services to manage the whole shelter. So, it's
I know they're,
quite
they're,
a big
they're
lift.
looking to improve that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big job. All right, thanks a lot, Sophie. Chelsea.
Most important story of the week. Richard Simmons, New Orleanian.
Yeah.
He made a very, very rare statement on Facebook this week saying he is not affiliated with a Pauly Shore biopic currently in production. Brother Martin grad.
That's important. All right, thank you.
Do want to see that
Quickly,
one.
LeBron.
We're hearing more about juveniles being charged as adults. The latest, we're hearing about this just as those who carjacked the DA and his mother, that latest teen being charged as an adult. The DA, Williams, says that certainly may be the case in the young man who is now arrested in the murder of the tourist last week.
Okay. All right, guys, thanks so much for being here, and thank you all for joining us, too. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.